next part of the big mission group, led up by Daryl Fitton. They've got a number of great young players on their books. One of them, Archie Self, he also came through the youth qualifier earlier on. Archie did a fascinating interview a while ago with the weekly Dartscast. He's got a really supportive dad, Paul Self, behind him. He's got a real bright future.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me as always, my co-host, the Darts statistician and still the Darts driver king. No one can catch him at the moment. It is Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Yeah, I've been racking up those miles or kilometers for our listeners in Kazakhstan, but I'm doing well. I'm not even joking because one of the Darts Driver King members is in Kazakhstan, so we gotta speak both miles and kilometers when we're talking about Strava these days. But I'm doing just fine. How are you, Alex?
Yeah, all good here, thank you. And yeah, the Darts Driver King Club is truly global. It's good to see. But lots to discuss on this week's show. We're going to be looking back at the last Euro Tour action of the year in a few moments. We're going to be looking ahead to the next major on the calendar, the European Championship, which starts on Thursday. Plus, the mailbag returns. We're going to be answering some of your listener questions. But let's start the show with the Czech Darts Open. The 13th and final stop on this year's European Tour took place in Prague over the weekend. And Luke Humphries returning to the winner's circle with a victory. What message does this win send out to the rest of the field?
I don't know if it sends that much of a message just because we already knew how he was, but I think the big message, if anything, is that he can withstand Luke Littler when Luke Littler is doing things that nobody's ever done before. And I think that's the big message from the week. Because I want to start with Luke Littler. 110, 116, 110, and then bang on 107 and going out in the semifinal to Luke Humphries. What a week that is. The highest average in European Tour history across the tournament. One of the highest averages ever in that match against Damon Hedda, getting revenge of sorts, although he's gotten revenge since then for losing a somehow not as high quality match, but still one of the great matches of the year at the UK Open back in March. Hedda himself averaging 105.5 in that. Luke Littler was doing things that people just don't do. Even that was not enough to get past Luke Humphries, because what did Luke Humphries do across his 5 matches? 100, basically 107, 103, 108, and then in the final 105. It would have been the standout weekend but for Luke Littler. But the thing was, he did win that match, and he did go that step further, or 2 steps further, and lift the title. I don't think it really sends much of a message. We knew that Luke Humphries is the face of darts. Even if he might not be the most mainstream player, that has to be Luke Littler. As far as for people who do follow darts week in, week out, there's no question who the best player in the world is. He's made every ranking major final since the European Championships last year. He didn't make it in the Europeans, but he made it to everyone since then, which means that this weekend he has a chance to complete the set of making it to every ranking final consecutively. He's won 4 of those 6, losing that UK Open final earlier this year, and then of course losing the World Grand Prix to Mike De Decker just a week before. And on top of that, he's won the World Cup. He's won a World Series event down in New Zealand. He's won another European Tour event, his 2nd of the year and his 7th overall. He's won a Players Championship event. He's won a little bit of everything this year. He's won on the floor. He's won on the Euro Tour. He's won on the World Series. He's won a major. He's won a pairs event in the World Cup. He's literally done a little bit of everything, and he's world number 1 and world champion. And now he's regained his Czech Darts Open title. The message was already sent. The message has already been received. And anyone who doesn't think that Luke Humphries is the best player in the world is mistaken. But Luke Littler is pretty darn close. And Luke Littler, if Luke Littler thinks that he is the best player in the world, he might be mistaken, but he's out to prove that any claim to the title that Humphries has is transient and temporary. This is a new era in darts. We have the 2 Lukes, and they are a step or 2 or 3 above everyone else. And that semifinal in Prague, it's just a sign of things to come, because you had the player who was the best player all weekend. He might have lost that match. And then you had a player who had one of the best weekends ever, and you still can't even call it the best of all of the weekends this weekend. That's how good these two are. That's the real message. And it's been heard and it's been registered.
Yeah, what a weekend of darts it was. Some truly exceptional darts on offer at the weekend. And obviously this question is going to be all about the world number one, Luke Humphries, a player that some have said in recent weeks hasn't got the attention or the credit his achievements deserve. Well, you've just spoken about him for a few minutes. I'm going to in a second as well. But I do want to touch on a few of the other players as well. And you mentioned Luke Littler there as well. I want to mention Michael van Gerwen as well, because both deserve a mention for the performances they produced in this last Euro Tour of the year. You mentioned Luke Littler going back to his old darts and throwing the 110, 116, 110 averages, and then losing out in that semi-final to Luke Humphries, despite averaging 106 almost at 107. And Michael van Gerwen, 104.95, and then losing with a 112 average. That average only worth one leg, losing 6-1 to Luke Littler in the quarterfinals on Sunday night. Some frightening numbers from the pair of them that will, I'm sure, strike fear in a lot of players. But coming back to Luke Humphries, you had two of his main rivals throwing those averages, and yet he was the one that walked away with the trophy. He was the last man standing, and I think that's one of the key takeaways from the weekend for me. Luke Humphries didn't have any of those flashy 110, 112, 116 averages, but what he did show was that sustained level of excellence across the 2 days that he played. He averaged over a ton in all 5 of his matches, dropped just 11 legs over those 5 matches, and the bounce back ability as well. Luke mentioned it in his interview after the final, that losing in major finals hurts. It's not easy to get over. He lost that World Grand Prix final to Mike Decker just 7 days earlier, a match that he was a favourite to win. But what does he do? Comes back, wins this title, and okay, it's not as big as the other events. It's not as big as the World Grand Prix. The Euro Tours, they haven't got the same stature in terms of the prize money and the prestige. However, they are played in front of some big crowds. The atmospheres we see them week in, week out on the Euro Tour, that they're played in, winning these titles, beating some of your rivals on the way. That's the perfect response from Luke Humphries to losing that World Grand Prix final. And it's just a reminder, I guess, to everyone else that, yeah, we're seeing these big averages being thrown in from Luke Littler. We're seeing them from Michael van Gerwen as well. But at the end of the weekend, Luke Humphries was the one holding the title. And that's a message to say that he is still the governor and he is still the number one.
Well, he might be the governor, but he's not a hurricane. There's only one hurricane in darts, and it might have been forgetting about him because he hadn't made the Euro Tour all year, and he didn't even qualify for this event, coming through the reserve list. But a very unlikely runner-up in Kim Huybrechts. What could this run to the final in Prague do for the Hurricane going forward?
Yeah, it was a late call-up for Kim Huybrechts. Not quite as late a call-up as Mike Kivenhoven had, though, and I want to give a mention to him as well, because we found out on Saturday morning, Gerwyn Price, unfortunately, he had to withdraw from the Czech Darts Open as well due to a trapped nerve in his neck, and Mike was brought in from the reserve list, made it on time to play Raymond van Barneveld on that Saturday night. His luggage, unfortunately, didn't arrive. He had to use a set of Barney's darts and pushed him close in a 6-4 defeat, but just getting there to the venue in Prague, that's given his hopes of keeping his tour card, qualifying for the World Championships a real boost. I think he's just £250 behind Mickey Mansell in that last Pro Tour spot, and we've got those last 2 Pro Tours coming up next week. But back to Kim Huybrechts, we found out a little bit earlier in the week, Thursday night, that he was going to be replacing Rob Cross in the field. The appreciation minute was ill and had to withdraw from the tournament. But talk about making the most of your opportunity, though. It was, as you say, Kim's first appearance on the Euro Tour this year. Hadn't been able to qualify for any of the Euro Tours this year through those qualifiers, and it's been a torrid time of late for the Hurricane. You go back to the start of 2023 when he won, I think it was the 3rd Players' Championship of the season, and we thought, is this going to be the start of a comeback for him? But since then, when you look at the ranking events before this past weekend, hadn't made another quarter-final. I think it's something like 65 ranking events since that title without a quarter-final, and we know he's had his injury problems. There was the unfortunate incident just before the World Cup this year when he got jumped by some rival football fans whilst watching his Belgian football team play. That put him on the shelf for a few weeks. And yeah, it wasn't Kim Huybrechts at his A game at the weekend, far from it. But credit to him for digging in and showing a lot of fight to come through 4 real close games. The 6-5 with Luke Woodhouse, 2 6-4s after that, and then the 7-6 in the semi-finals with his close friend Neil Sonneveld, who had a great run, his best run on the Euro Tour, and came within a leg of qualifying for the European Championship as well. But for Kim Huybrechts, the final, a step too far, and he said that himself. It was too early for him, but give him a year, 18 months when he's back at full flow, and he'll give Luke Humphries a game. And that's what he's got to work towards now. That 12 grand that he's won at the weekend, it was unexpected. It did come out of nowhere. He wasn't in this European Tour event, but that money secured him Ali Pally now. And if you take that 12 grand away, he was going into next week still in the spots for the World Championship, but it wasn't a done deal. He still had some work to do. So he can go into them events next week with a little bit of freedom behind him. Then he's got the Grand Slam qualifiers on Friday, and let's see if he can put another run together, because I'm not ready to say Kim Huybrechts is back, but this run at the weekend, it has given him that unlikely boost when he probably needed it the most.
Definitely. And I'm also not ready to say he's back, but there's definitely evidence that he's back going in the right direction. And that came from before this weekend. You mentioned that he's not made the last 16 since that out of nowhere title early in 2023. He's made a few last 16s on the floor. He made a last 16 in this very event last year, but he hadn't even won a match on the European Tour outside of Prague in 2 years. And he hadn't made a Euro Tour all year. He was 38th in averages in the Euro Tour qualifiers this year, rarely winning a match, losing to people like Rhys Griffin, Jacques Lob, Robert Grundy, players that you would expect that he should beat. And then like against players like Richard Veenstra, who he's probably on a similar level with. He lost both times. Also lost to Jeffrey Deswan twice in those Euro Tour openers. And in Players' Championships, it sounds a little worse, 46, but remember, you're now taking out the better player. You're now putting back in the better players. So he actually did a little bit better in those. And that's where he's right between Martin Schindler and Richard Veenstra. But he's been moving in the right direction in those. So far this year, he's only had 700 plus averages in Players' Championships, but 5 of them have been since the start of September. He's had 22 95 plus averages. 13 of those, quite a bit more than half, have been in the second half of the season. Only 9 were in the first half of the season. So there is clear evidence that he has stepped up his game and that he's starting to find something, because there was nothing really there before that. And yes, he was fortunate this week, and I think he knew that. The biggest thing being that he was even in this tournament to begin with. He didn't qualify. He lost out to Martin Lukeman in the last match in qualification, but he took advantage of that. He won a match against Luke Woodhouse in a last leg decider. He beat Pavel Dirtle, who would host nation player, who might not have been electric, but boy, that guy was finishing well. Barely missed a dart at double against Joe Cullen and hit all the right shots at the right time, including one dart at the double in the deciding leg against Josh Rock to get through to the last 16. Then he beat Jermaine Wadamina, who was one of the players of the tournament on the first or in the second day with his whitewash win over Chris Dobie. Didn't back it up after that. And then held his nerve after Niels Zonneveld missed some darts for the match in the decider again. He kept finding ways to win. And yeah, he ran out of steam in the final. The score line probably was the fair scoreline. The stat line less so, because of all the darts he had on the floor. He probably was closer to a 90-91 average. If you put those in, he literally had 114 points on the floor in one visit, which is why he wasn't under 500 after his first visit. 1 scored, but 2 treble 19s on the floor. It was a bit unfortunate that it ended that way, but it doesn't take away that it was a weekend that he needed, and he got it done when he needed to. You mentioned how that now seals up the World Championships. Beforehand, he was in the 31st place in the Pro Tour qualifier list, and there wasn't going to be any opportunity for him to improve on that this weekend. Well, he gets into the field and gets 12,000 pounds, and now he's in the World Championships. He came pretty darn close in the end to playing his way into the European Championships and the Grand Slam had he won that final. He's given himself something to build on, and he's given himself something to build on at a time when nothing seemed to be going the right way for him. I don't know what more to say. You mentioned his comments in the post-match interview. I think it was the right mindset to have. I think he sees that he is playing that little bit better, that the stats also indicate. And I think he knows that that's, not where he wants to be, but it is the direction he wants to be going on. This is a little bonus for him, or a big bonus for him to have had this weekend, because it makes up for some of the matches he's lost that he probably shouldn't have. And it also makes up for some of the underperformances he's had over the course of the year. And it shows just that little bit reward for what has been a better second half of the year. But he needs to keep it going. And considering he's a twice former European Tour winner and a twice former Premier League player, it's a lot more improvement to go before we see the real Kim Huybrechts back.
That was our look back at the Euro Tour. We're going to be looking ahead to the European Championship this week in a moment. But before we do, let's bring in our first guest on this week's show. He's going to be in Dortmund this week as an ITV pundit and commentator. He is a former world number one, a former major champion, the PDPA CEO. Here's our chat with Alan Warriner-Little. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the former world number one, now the ITV pundit and commentator, Alan Warriner-Little. Thanks for the time again, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, lots going on in the world of darts. We've got the European Championship starting on Thursday. It's a busy time of the year on the hockey. As a former pro, you're now involved in darts through various other roles. What's this time of year like for you, still following the game?
The best way to describe it is mental. And not just my ITV stuff. There's a lot of ITV events. There's a lot of other Sky events. And the, development challenge tours finishes, ProTours, European Tour just finished this weekend, so did the Women's Series. And then obviously we've got all the other PDPA work we have to do getting ready for the end of the year, which is the memberships, qualifying skill entries, and getting everything ready for the new season. Mad.
Yeah, you've been involved working with the PDPA for a long time, over 15 years now, and in January this year it was announced you were taking on a president role in the organisation. You'd been the CEO before then. Has much changed in terms of what you're doing with the PDPA, or has it been fairly similar?
I think it's pretty similar at this moment in time. We're looking at restructuring a few things over the next few years. We've obviously got another board member on board with Glenn Durant, and he's now getting his teeth stuck into things because it takes a little bit of time to get used to everything. So we're kind of looking a bit further down the line, really, in the future. So that's why I took this role on in terms of from the CEO to the president, and got Glenn involved, and we're getting a few more people involved hopefully over the next few years. Good
to hear. And for those newer listeners to the show, the PDPA, you work closely with the DRA, the PDC. You're there for the players, looking after their interests, kind of like a players' union, which covers hundreds of players. One player we've got to talk about is Luke Littler. I know you got asked on Twitter after the World Final with the PDPA helping Luke adjust to his newfound fame, and you said that you were. That run at Ali Pali, it brought a lot of interest into darts. So what has it been like this year for players adjusting to that extra attention?
Well, absolutely, yeah. You hit the nail on the head there with the extra attention, not just the media coverage, but what it's done is, put a big spotlight on the sport as a whole. People want to know how Luke Littler's doing, people that never really bothered before. I used to get all sorts of notifications on my phone from BBC and all sorts of newspaper articles, and basically anything to do with darts is big news. So it's getting sort of the right balance in that, because obviously you can sometimes get some bad publicity, which is no fault of anybody's, just the way the world is. But generally, the media attention's been massive, and it's carried on for the rest of the year.
And with Luke in particular, what a year he's had since that World Final, winning the Premier League, the World Series finals, many other titles. He's on the brink of the top 16. The phrase generational talent has been used a lot to describe him. You've followed him up close through your work with the PDPA and ITV. What have you made of his emergence onto the scene?
I think what we have to remember is his age as well. I mean, he's only just turned 18, 17. He's such a young lad. You sometimes forget how old he is, and he's got to learn all this. I mean, you look at the Premier League as an example. Can you imagine a year prior to that saying to somebody, the person that's going to win the Premier League next year is not even a tour card holder, they'd laugh in your face. It's just been so unique for him getting to that World Final and getting the attention that not just he's got and the sport as well. But to win the Premier League, I mean, you look at that as a whole, he didn't start off great. It took him quite a while to win one. But once he got his teeth stuck into it, he looked, it wasn't like a fish out of water, was he? He looked like he was meant to be there, is the best word, I suppose. and then he ends up winning it. But when he gets on stage and when he plays darts, he doesn't think about everything else around him. He seems to play better, in my view, and he's more of a stage player than a floor player.
Yeah, what a story it's been to follow, and from one player at the start of their professional career to one reaching his final chapters. Steve Beaton is his last Pro Tours next week. We're all hoping he gets to Ali Pali to have a proper send-off, but are there any plans in place to mark Steve's last events on the tour?
Well, funny enough, I was talking to him via email the other day because he'd asked about a few things. And I suggested that because apart from anything else, he's been a mate of mine for a long, long time, as well as a colleague and an adversary. So I said to him about doing a sort of an interview at the end. Obviously, that'd be better after the Ali Pali. Hopefully he gets there. He's in a position there at this moment in time, so hopefully he can get through. That'd be a great send-off, won't it? He'll obviously be at Minehead for the Players' Championship finals. So I've already had a word with ITV about doing something there. Because it'd be the last time he'd be on ITV screens. So we'll have to wait and see. But, what a great career he's had. He's kind of the quiet man in the game, isn't he? Doesn't really say that much, just gets up there and plays darts.
Yeah, it'd be great to see a tribute for him. And going back to the PDPA being there for the players, we saw it firsthand during the World Series finals. Peter Wright mentioning on the ITV broadcast that he'd had some help from the PDPA. Can you talk to us about that? And I guess seeing someone as high up as Peter endorse the work and services the PDPA offers, that must help other players reach out as well who might need that support.
Well, absolutely. We try and reiterate this to the players all the time, and obviously we wouldn't have said anything unless Peter said it first, so he's put it out there in the media spotlight. We had the discussion, and we gave him, a lot of the top players are too busy with the calendars, playing darts, travelling. They don't think about anything else. That's all they worry about. They want to progress their careers, win tournaments, win prize money, and there's obviously a lot of travelling involved, plus exhibitions and everything else that they do. So it's only when things start going a little bit wrong, they start thinking about, what will I do about it? And then obviously they realise that the services that we offer are very good. I mean, Sporting Chance, our players get the same service as a Premier League footballer. So if they have an issue, we can discuss it with them and put them in touch with the right person to help them with whatever problem they have if we can't deal with it ourselves. So there's plenty there for players. They just got to act really and look, and all those things will be there for them.
Glad to hear it. And we'll touch a bit on your playing career and one record that remains in your possession, the highest match average in the World Grand Prix, 106.45 back in 2001. This year we saw Ross Smith get 101, Luke Humphries a ton in the semi-finals, but nowhere near your 106. Is that ever going to be beaten?
Strangely, I think I put a tweet out a few days before the tournament. I generally had that feeling. I thought it was going to go this year because the quality and the standard seems to get higher and higher and higher. So I generally thought that it would have gone. And you would probably think with the double start that it would be the first couple of rounds that it would have to be done. Further on, there's obviously too many legs to have that perfection in starting straight away and finishing very quickly. But I generally did think it was going to go. Still surprised it's such a long time. And strangely, I looked at somebody showed me the stats the other day. The first leg of the match, I had a terrible leg. I couldn't get off. I think I got off from the 6th or 7th dart and lost that leg. So it just shows you that obviously I played well for the rest of the match.
Yeah, the record survives another year, and the next major on the calendar starts in just a few days' time, as we mentioned, the European Championship. You're going to be heading to Dortmund as part of the ITV team. We knew the draw already. It's based on the Euro Tour order of merit, but looking at the draw, how excited are you for this one?
Always love this tournament because it's such a great place to go to in Dortmund. It's at the next door to the football ground, massive arena. I think it holds between somewhere around 10, 12,000, I think. We normally get 7 or 8. It's absolutely, the noise in there is incredible. We get that a lot of our big major events now, but this is quite unique. They love the darts in Germany, as you know, and the European Championships is one of the big majors. You've got to qualify by going to the European Tour. It doesn't matter if you're world ranked number 1 or 101. You've got to earn the right on the European Tour. So it is quite difficult. Certainly for the players a little bit lower down in the rankings to qualify. But what it does as well is it doesn't give you that number 1 seed against number 32 seed in the world. It gives you the unique, what a lot of ITV events have, a different ranking system. So you could have number 1 and 2 in the world playing each other in the first round as an example. So I think it's unique in that sense. And you look at 2 years ago, Ross Smith, great player, started winning Pro Tours, all of a sudden then wins a major, the European Championship, played fantastic all week. plus average every round, I think. So it's open for that. And there's plenty of players in good form who will maybe be thinking the same thing.
Definitely. And you mentioned the Players' Championship finals, another ITV event coming up next month. The field for that will be confirmed next week. Then after that, it's the Masters at the start of next year. It was recently announced the Masters is going up to 32 players. It's going to be ranked for the first time. Is there any news on how those 32 players are going to be picked?
I spoke to Matt Porter actually last week, and I think it's going to be at the end of this month, I think is what he said. So we're waiting for that. There's quite a few proposals in the mix, so it's up to the PDC and the PDC board to pick what they think's right. And let's be honest, they don't get many things wrong when you look at the way darts is nowadays. But we'll have to wait and see what the actual format will be. But great to see it ranked, because generally it was always the season opener after the World Championships in a non-ranked event. But now it's ranked. There'll just be a little more impetus in terms of the players on it. So that'll be really interesting and to do. And the next day as well, so even better.
Yes, definitely added some prestige to the event. And we've got some questions that have come in from our listeners and some familiar names to you as well. The first one comes from Rog, Chizzy's manager. He says he wants us to ask you, who is the best looking manager in darts?
He's not, no, unfortunately. He's well down the list. If there was 100 managers, he'd be around three figures.
We've had two come in from Stuart Pike. He says, I'm seeing Alan later today. We're flying to Germany. And he wants to ask you, when did you last average over 65? His guess is 2004.
I might get the darts out tonight and see if he wants a game, and that might shut him up.
And he's got another serious one this time. He says you're one of the best players of his generation not to win the World Championship. Is that your biggest regret from your playing career?
Probably, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you achieve what you achieved, and you lost it what you lost, and you can't change it. I had my chances and didn't take them. The biggest chance, I think, was against John Lowe, I think, in the 93, the very last final, really, before the split. And then, obviously, Phil Taylor came along and started winning everything. So it was very difficult time to win majors, to be fair. But I enjoyed my career. I achieved what I achieved, and now I'm still sitting back enjoying doing everything else I'm doing in darts.
I've got another one from one of your ITV colleagues, Ned Bolting, who says, should Alan try and compete with Chris Mason on shirts or just accept he's got a second-rate wardrobe compared to the great man?
Well, all I can say is that every one of Chris's shirts look like my granny's curtains. And she's got quite a few. I think Chris actually must be contacting her and she must be making them for him out of her old curtains.
Brilliant. We've got another one here, comes from Phil, who says, can you have a good night out in Lancaster?
Absolutely. Lancaster, I tell you what, I'm going back on, I think it's the summertime in December. I'm going down there for a friend's party. I haven't been down there for ages, but it used to be a great night out there. Sunday night used to be the best. I used to go with a few of my mates around town and do the karaoke and stay. It was great. I'm looking forward to going back down, actually. Good
times. We've got to ask you then, what is your go-to karaoke if you get called up?
Anything. Anything at all. I've not really got one particular song. I just start singing when I've had a few drinks.
Happy days.
Very well, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, we've not heard you yet, so we'll pass judgment. But we've got two more that have come from FDI. Back to your PDPA work, and he wants to know what are the PDPA doing right, and on what could they improve on.
I think it's like anything. You can't rest on your laurels. You've got to keep looking forward. As I said earlier, we're trying to get more people involved. That's why Glenn's come on board. He's going to start doing a few things. I think the biggest problem we have is getting the communication to players, because there's so many things, like you mentioned before, that Peter Wright eventually found the things that he needed with the problems he was having. All them things are in place, but a lot of players don't know that because they don't read things. So we're trying to look at different aspects and ways of communicating to our players, because it's very difficult, because a lot of players, certainly the top players, have managers, so they deal with everything for them. So we've got to go through the management system as well, and just really, really look at the best way to communicate with our players. We're looking into doing surveys at the end of this year and start of next year, which Glenn Durant's going to start doing, and looking at like a 10-point interview system, which every player is going to have an interview for about half an hour at some point, so we can inform them of absolutely everything, so they know that everything what's in place.
That's a good idea. And the second one from FDI says, if you were a player right now, what would Alan want that the PDPA is not delivering on right now?
Well, I think everybody individual really, but players, I probably did it myself, moan like hell. They really do. But it's just part and parcel of being a top sportsman. And especially if you lose. If you lose, it's not your fault, it's everybody else's. And I think it's probably handy in all the sports, probably more in darts than anything else. And that's just the way it is. You know, we've got to deal with that. We know how to handle it. And I think personally, I've got a really good rapport with all the top players. They can call me anytime if there's an issue. And I'd like to think that would have been in place. We didn't really have a players' association like it is now when I was playing. There was one there, but it was very sort of ad hoc, and it was wasn't anybody full time that you could contact all the time and stuff like that. So the things we have in place now, I think, are really good, but I certainly think we can get better in some aspects of it.
And the last one from me, I think I know the answer to this from when we met a few weeks ago in person, although it might have changed now that you've got my number, but who is the most famous person in your phone contacts?
Oh, famous person. I'm trying to think. Somebody asked me the other day, similar question. I couldn't think. I'll tell you who it was. We were talking about Bullseye, bringing back Bullseye. And I said, Freddie's doing it, isn't he? And they said, I hope he does all right. I said, I'll give him a text and wind him up. What are you doing with his number? I said, well, I've known him for years. He went, oh, right, okay.
That's a good shout. I'd have put in Alex Ferguson in there as well.
Oh, I've got Alex, yes. I've got Sir Alex, yes. I forgot about Sir Alex. I'm seeing him for a while. Obviously, he's taken a bit more of a back step, hasn't he, at the club? Obviously, it's unfortunate when his wife passed away. And obviously taken not really any roles now, apart from just being the person that's there. But it'd be nice to see him again at some point. Reminisce
about the good times. Well, Alan, it's always great to get you on the show. Appreciate you giving us some of your time. Enjoy Dortmund this weekend, and all the best with what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Lovely. Thanks, Alex, and thanks to everybody else. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Alan for joining us. Now, looking ahead to the European Championship, Martin Schindler goes to Dortmund as the number one seed. But looking at the cause of the draw, how does his section compare to the other top four seeds?
I think overall he got what I wouldn't say the easiest quarter. And that's because there's no such thing as an easy quarter anymore. But I think he will have no complaints about the draw that he's been given. Especially when you look at particularly the second and third quarters, but the third quarter being the one that really stands out. But starting with Schindler's quarter, there's former champion in there who'll be defending the money this time around, Ross Smith, who I picked to win the last two majors. It hasn't come true for me, but there's been moments in those events where he looked the part. There's also been moments in it where he hasn't. And you also have in that quarter Gerwyn Price, a former world number one, Raymond van Barneveld, the former world champion, world number one, Daryl Gurney, the handicapper's nightmare, Ryan Searle, who should have won a Euro Tour just a few weeks ago. It is not an easy quarter. But then you compare it to the third quarter, where you have Luke Humphries, who we've already spent 10 minutes talking about today. You have Chris Dobie, who's won 3 Players' Championship events this year. You have Johnny Clayton, who is playing very well again. Might not quite be where he was in 2020, but he's the closest he's been in some time. You have Rob Cross, who is as good as he's been since he became world champion 6 years ago. You have James Wade, who has been resurgent over the last few months. You have Peter Wright, who just won a Euro Tour after being written off for dead by both of us. And you have Jermaine Wadamina, who I think is the best he has ever been. It's certainly the best he's been since the pandemic, but I think overall he might be better now, or pretty darn close to better now, than he was when he was on the cusp of the top 25 years ago. This is not an easy quarter. In fact, it is a brutally difficult quarter, because I just mentioned 7 players, and the only one I didn't mention is because of injuries, and he's won a major last year. He's made 4 major finals in the last 25 months, and that's Nathan Aspinall. That's the quarter that I think is the most difficult, and I don't think there's a good argument to the contrary. There's some tough players in the others. Luke Littler being in a quarter by itself makes it a difficult quarter, but the rest of the fourth quarter just not as tough. MBG, Chizzy, Michael Smith in the second quarter, again, a tough trio. you can throw in both Stephen Bunting and Gary Anderson as well, but it just doesn't hold the same candle as the third quarter. So I think overall, Schindler got a bit lucky with the draw, but then again, he's the top seed, so he's earned his luck. The third quarter is the one you don't want to be in, and well, in my case, I'm not in any quarter, so I'm just happy, and I'm happy enough with that.
Yeah, I think the third quarter is a popular answer at the moment. This is our question of the week, sponsored by Condor Darts. Make sure you get on Twitter and have your say. The poll's going to be running until the start of the European Championship on Thursday, and at the time of recording, the third quarter that you mentioned, Burton, that is leading the poll 45%. Closely followed by that second quarter with Dave Chisnell, 37%. And yeah, it's a tough one because we were chatting on the show a few weeks ago. We were trying to predict who was going to end up being the number one seed for Dortmund this week. And I said I'd love it to be Martin Schindler. I think he deserves it for what he's achieved on the Euro Tour this year, winning those 2 titles. And he's managed to keep hold of that top ranking. But being the number one seed, has it given him an easier run of it? I think the only thing it has done is ensure that he doesn't meet one of the 2 Lukes before the final, Humphries and Littler. But before then, I think there is some tricky hurdles standing in his way. Dirk van Dijvenbode, he had to sweat it out all weekend without throwing a dart until the final game in Prague to see if he could keep hold of that 32nd and last spot in the field. I think he's going to be a dangerous first round opponent. And then you've got Going Price or Darrell Gurney in the last 16. It's not an easy run for the first 2 games. And for me, if I'm trying to plot a route through for the top 4 seeds, I'm like you. I think the hardest possible route is for the second seed, Luke Humphries, starting off against Nathan Aspinall, who, like Dirk, just snuck into this event in that penultimate spot, and it's been well documented the time that he's had off through injury, but he's now back playing and everything again. And then Chris Dobey or Johnny Clayton in the second round, and okay, Chris Dobey coming into this event off the back of a 6-0 defeat to Jermaine Wattermina at the weekend, but still averaged a ton in that game, and Johnny Clayton a quarter final at the weekend, and before that quarter final strung together 3 very good performances on the stage. And then the other 4 players in that section that you mentioned, Rob Cross, James Wade, Peter Wright, Jermaine Wattermina, who I just mentioned a second ago, he had a great run in Prague as well, getting to the quarterfinals, and probably should have gone further as well, but we'll come on to it in a moment. Looking ahead, we've got one of these 32 player major events in the field. It's just littered with quality wherever you look, and for us as darts fans, you look down that draw and you just can't wait for it to get started. So for me, the third quarter, I would say that is the hardest one. Then I would go with the second quarter with Dave Chisnell, Michael Smith. You've also got that big tie between Stephen Bunting and Gary Anderson. You've also got Michael Van Gogh in there. For me, they are the 2 hardest sections of the draw. Martin Schindler, he's the number one seed. He could have been harder for him, but still, I think he has got a tough run of it to get going with Dirk van Dijvenbode and then Price or Gurney in round 2.
Well, you'll get the first choice for this one, so I've had to put 6 different matches down on my list and hope that one of them survives, because there is no draw needed for this event. So we're able to record. Well, we could have recorded yesterday, I guess, if we wanted to record very late, but we're recording on Monday evening UK time. Everyone is seeded and into the draw 1 through 32. So which of those 16 first round ties most catch your eye from the lineup?
Yeah, some very tasty first round ties on here, and we'll get to our weekly Dartscast parlay with Quiff after this question as well. And I don't know about you, Burton, but for me, it feels like it's getting more difficult each time we get to a major, trying to predict just 2 winners from the first round these days. But you've got 6 ties down on your bit of paper there. I've picked out 4 ties, so hopefully I'll leave you with at least 2 to talk through in a moment. But I'll pick one for each quarter of the draw, and I'll start off in that top quarter, and he has got Martin Schindler, the number one seed in it. And I'm going to give a mention to Ross Smith versus Luke Woodhouse. You mentioned about Ross Smith defending that prize money from winning the European Championship 2 years ago. And yeah, it's a big week coming up for Ross Smith, because this year he has broken into the world's top 10. He's currently at number 9 on the Order of Merit. And as we know, it's a 2-year rolling Order of Merit. He's defending that 120 grand for winning this title 2 years ago. That's a big wad of cash to defend. And if he does have an early exit this week, he's not just going to drop out the top 10, the top 16, but he's going to be around that 20 marks. That's quite a fall. And with the World Championships just around the corner as well, I'm sure players are going to have their eye on their seeding for Ali Pally. You want to be as high as possible. So, yeah, it's an important week for Ross Smith to try and recoup some of that prize money and Luke Woodhouse's opponent. It's another major debut ticked off for him this week, making his debut in the European Championship, and he's going to want to make his mark straight away. So I think that's an interesting tie. Second quarter of the draw, I've got to go with Stephen Bunting against Gary Anderson. Gary back in the European Championships for the first time since 2016. We know he had that long break from playing in the Euro Tours. He come back last year, qualified for 2. This year he's played in 2 again. He's withdrew from 8 of them, I think, but he's won one of the 2 that he played in. That was more than enough to finish in the top 32 and qualify. So it's great to see him in this event again. The third quarter, I'm going to go with Peter Wright against Jermaine Wattimena. I talked about the 2022 European champion Ross Smith. Well, Peter Wright, he is the reigning European champion from last year, not defending that prize money until next year, but defending the title this year and coming up against Jermaine Wattimena, who I know you mentioned a moment ago. You've mentioned him a few times on the show this year, that he's quietly impressed you, and he's back in this event for the first time since 2019 and deservedly so. And lastly, fourth quarter, very briefly, I'm going to go with Josh Rock against Mike De Decker. You've got the newest major winner in Mike De Decker against a player who has been tipped for a few years now, since he's got on the tour really, to be a major winner. Not happened for him yet, but Josh Rock this year, he has won his first title on a stage in the PDC ranking event, that is. He won the European Tour event earlier in the year. That's helped him to be the 6th seed for this event. And for Mike De Decker, we put it on Twitter at the weekend, before the Czech Darts Open, he'd only ever averaged above a ton once on a PDC stage. Goes to Prague at the weekend and he throws 3 ton plus averages in his first 3 games. So I think he's settled into life as a major champion, because the way he's played at the weekend, he's going to go into this event as a major champion and he'll fancy the job of doubling his tally. And I think that game with Josh Rock, that could be a cracker as well.
You somehow only managed to say 2 of mine. I thought even though you were only saying 4 matches, you'd still find a way to get 5 of mine mentioned. But I mean, it's not that I disagree with the other ones you have. I had Bunting Anderson and I had Rock De Decker on my list as well. So I'll mention the other 4 I have. It means I don't have one from the bottom quarter, but I'm fine with that. I'll start with Ryan Soel, Raymond van Barneveld up in the top quarter. I mean, we've talked about Ryan Soel quite a bit recently, missing all those darts to win his first stage title a few weeks ago on the European Tour. But I think Raymond van Barneveld's a tough opponent. You know, he's qualified for pretty much everything this year, and he's been doing that now the last couple years. And even though he's not been winning on the big stage, he's not gotten past the last 32 of any major championship other than the World Championships since that run to the semifinals of the Grand Slam in 2022. He's, I think, been playing overall with more consistency and more freedom than we'd seen from him since well before his first retirement in 2019. And I think that makes him a tough opponent. And I think he has another big run in a major in him. And that's, I don't know if it's going to be this week, but, you know, we talked about that top quarter and I thought it was certainly not the most difficult here. This is an opportunity for that big run for Raymond van Barneveld, especially starting out with a shorter format. I think that's a really interesting tie. Michael Smith, Dave Chisnell, I don't need to say anything more about that match. That match speaks for itself. I mean, the second quarter has some really high profile matchups. I also have Chris Dobie against Johnny Clayton on my list. I talked about them earlier on in the show. Dobie, 3 Players Championship titles this year. Johnny Clayton playing well again. And I think it's going to be a really fun watch. At least I hope that's a match that goes the distance, because I don't know who to pick in it, and I'd like to see 11 legs between them. And I'll mention just one more: Rob Cross against James Wade. 2 other players that I mentioned coming in that toughest quarter. I think if in any other quarter, I would say that whoever wins this has a great chance to make the semifinal. They certainly have a chance. And they probably will be favored against either Peter Wright or Jermaine Wattimena in the second round, but it is still the Luke Humphries quarter. But for James Wade, you know, does he have another major in him? It was looking like he was dropping down the rankings. Now he's back in the top 16 overall off of a great few months. And Rob Cross, he's already won a couple of won one World Series event this year and made 2 other finals. But he's looking like maybe a 5th major title, and first in 4 years is not that far away. So I'm curious to see if he can take that next step, but it starts by getting past the machine.
We shall see. Well, they're the ties that we're looking forward to watching on Thursday and Friday. We've got a couple of guests to bring you now before we finish up with the mailbag. First, you're going to hear from Quiff's Jack Milner. We're going to be talking through the weekly Dartscast parlay, and then we're going to be joined by the DPA Tour Order of Merit winner. He's going to be making his debut at Ali Pali in December. I'll chat with Joe Comito. I'm pleased to say we're joined once again by Jack Milner from our sponsors Quiff to look ahead to the European Championship. Jack, as always, appreciate the time. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm fashionably late. We were supposed to do this yesterday, and as I said, childcare problems, me not being able to look after my own, caused delay. But yeah, good memories of the European Championship this week. We were talking off air how I spent a week here in Dortmund, which was, not great for the waistline nor the bank balance, but a great week. And I think people who went the trip, it's well worth it. The little arena is really next to the football stadium. It's a fantastic venue, and it should be good action out in Germany. Yeah,
it's definitely on my bucket list as well. And as always, when we get you on, we'll look ahead to our weekly Dartscast parlay. We'll just run through the leaderboard, who's got the bragging rights out of me, you, and our co-host Burton. At the minute, me and you, Jack, we're level 5 right, 3 wrong. Burton, he's a bit behind us. He's got 3 right and 5 wrong, but still plenty of the season to go. A few more parlays before we get to the end of the season. And looking at our picks for the first round, it's getting more difficult to make these picks with the quality in the field. But Burton, he's gone with Danny Noppert and Luke Littler to win their first round games. I've gone with Damon Hector and Ryan Searle. Jack, who are your 2 picks, and what does that give us for a parlay overall?
Yeah, and with credit to Burton, he generally goes for the bigger price fancies. I remember at the start of the year, he was going for 7-2 underdogs against 5-1 on shots. He has reversed the trend this week. It must be hastened to add the fact that he's tipped up Danny Noppert at 4-7, and Luke Littler is the shortest price of the opening games this week, and he's 1-5 against Goldfinger himself, Andrew Gilding. I've gone with 2 odds on. I think Luke Humphries is probably the bet of the week in terms of if you're looking for a bet for the outright. Probably a little bit skinny to win his opening game. I think Getty's a good price against Daryl Gurney. Getty's 1-2, more or less, 1-2, 1.5. And Michael Van Gerwen, he's still incredible. Van Gerwen lost that game against Luke Littler on the Euro Tour of the week. Averaged 112, still got battered 6-1. I think the last outshot was 84, was it, 2 Dartler with after Van Gerwen banged in a 180. And he went 60-24, 60-28, phenomenal Littler. So yeah, Van Gerwen 4-11 against Gabriel Clemens, about 1.3, 1.35 in Gezi. And for the 6-fold itself, it'll pay about 15-2, 7.5 with us at Quiff, and obviously there's always the chance that you can get supercharged. But we were saying off air, there's a lot of value if you look for there's a lot of very tight matches potentially. So you could easily see Stephen Burton or Gary Anderson winning their respective matches. I know you guys fancy Ryan Searle against Van Barneveld, these odds on. But you wouldn't be surprised to see a few matches go either way. Again, you've got Dobie and Clayton, Cross and Wade. And then Dave Chisholm against Michael Smith. I spoke to Chizzy in the week, obviously a Quiff-sponsored talent. And I think he needs his abacus because he was struggling to count on stage, bless him, without his glasses. So he's either going to get an abacus or a new pair of glasses. But Michael Smith, another player that you probably say is finally coming into a bit of form, like a Van Gerwen, like a Gary Anderson. Darts fans have got it really good at the minute. There's competitive action pretty much all across the opening couple of days.
Yeah, it's the best time of year to be a darts fan. And 2 players I want to mention to you, Jack, before we go and to get some prices for them, because first of all, Mike De Decker, the newly crowned World Grand Prix champion. I don't think there was many people tipping him to win that title a couple of weeks ago. And the other one, he's going to be the top seed in his home country in Germany this week, Martin Schindler. Just give me a word on both of them for this week.
Yeah, Mike De Decker played really well, and I wasn't say I was unfamiliar with him, but it was how well he played against Humphries on the big stage, right? And I think it helped the fact in the Grand Prix he got that cushion early. I think, did he go 4-1 up and Luke got it back to 4, or he got 5-4 up, and then obviously that he had that breathing space. De Decker's 33-1 this week, about 35 on the outright markets. I could see him being popular. He wouldn't be for me at the prices. I do think there's a lot of depth ahead of him. And Martin Schindler, if you're looking around, you can get 50 to 1 with Sky Bet. We're about 35 as well. Every time I see Martin Schindler, I think he should be doing his A-levels or something. I cannot believe the baby face on him, and with the height as well. He's only a little fella. But yeah, 35 and 35 if you fancy Mike De Decker or Martin Schindler. But again, I'm very boring. I think it is very hard to back against Luke Humphries at the minute. I know he lost at the weekend. I know he won at the weekend, lost in the Grand Prix final, but he just looks, dare I say it, so cool upon that stage, and a man so comfortable. Yeah, I've not seen that like since, I'd say, even when Van Gerwen was dominating the sport, you'd say, 15 to through maybe 19, he still went through a kind of a multitude of emotions. I've not seen anyone look as cool as like Phil back in his pomp, say, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I just can't wait. Every tournament now, you're going to see rivalries renewed with probably Humphries and Littler, and Luke had the last laugh of the week in the week. But Littler, the bandwagon rolls on. You see him every time he plays, right? The trending topics and the impressions he does. It's still box office, and the ultimate winner out of this. We say darts fans. Barry Hearney's rubbing his hands together, because I think he's up for renewing his deal with Sky very shortly, and I think there will most definitely be turkey on the Hearn Christmas table come December.
Definitely can't argue with that. And remember, for our listeners, if you want to have a flutter on the darts this week, head over to Quiff, download the app, or go to the Quiff website. And remember, 18 plus, T's and C's apply. Please gamble responsibly. BeGambleAware.org for more on that. And Jack will. Good luck with the parlay this week. Good luck with anyone who's having a bet on the darts, and we'll be back just before the Grand Slam in a couple of weeks' time.
Fingers crossed. Top man, thanks. 15 to 2 for the 6-fold Quiff, and remember, supercharge your bets, and fingers crossed, you might have a couple of winners in there as well. Fingers crossed.
I'm pleased to say we're joined by the water boy, Joe Comito. Thanks for the time again, Joe. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. And thanks for having me on again.
It's great to have you on, and we're talking just 2 weeks on from the final weekend of the DPA Tour season, where you finished top of the order of merit to qualify for the PDC World Championship for the first time. You said in an interview afterwards that it still hadn't sunk in yet, so has it sunk in now that you're going to be going to Ali Pali in December?
No. As soon as we got back from New South Wales, I went back to work. I'm trying not to think about it too much, to be honest, because it's still 2 months away, and you don't want to play like in any dart game. You don't want to play a game before you get there. So it's just a matter of, at the moment, talking to people. I've talked to Damo, talked to a few people that have been there, just trying to get my bearings and stuff like that. But you're probably thinking once everything's booked and I get over there, then it starts. But like I said, don't get me wrong, I understand what it is, but I'm just trying not to think about it as much as I can.
Well, I remember when we last had you on the show last summer, you said after hitting the 9 darter on the DPA Tour, the last thing left to do on your list was to get to the Worlds. A year on, and you are going to be ticking that off the list at the end of the year. So what does that mean to you?
I did actually remember when I said that to you, and I thought to myself, well, Jesus, I said, well, now the only other thing is to do is to be a world champion. And if things work out the way I usually said it, within a year or two, things have happened when I've actually said something. But look, don't get me wrong, that's a huge goal, and this is the first step of that, I guess. But look, just to make it at the moment is great, considering where I was 5 years ago to where I am now. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, certainly is. And for players in Australia, you've got the DPA Tour, you've got the Oceanic Masters, that one-off qualifier to try and get to Ali Pali. Last year, you finished 4th on the DPA Tour. The Oceanic Masters, you lost out in a decider to Hopaipua in the quarterfinals. So coming into this year, did you feel like it could be your year?
I actually, because I probably made a mistake at the start of the year. I didn't. A few things happened at the start of the year, and I didn't play enough early tournaments, local ones. And it did take me, even though I was playing well, I wasn't getting results. But I said to myself, look, you're playing well. Got to the one that I qualified for the World Series, got to that last day, and I actually said to myself, you're playing way too good not to actually do something. And I won the last event, which got me to the World Series. Just before this last event, I had a good practice on the Monday night, played well on our local Wednesday. I knew I'd have to have a perfect weekend because I was so far down. But got to the first event, I thought, once I lost that first final, I thought, oh, well, there was your chance. But I was still pretty confident. Like, it's just, with me, it's just all about confidence, I guess. And you got to try to take it now on stage and stuff like that.
Well, you mentioned the World Series as well. You've become a regular on that. You've played on it for the last 3 years. I know it's not gone according to plan so far, losing it in the first round. It's a tough task facing one of the 8 best in the world. But have you been more disappointed with your own performances, not playing how you can up there on the stage yet?
Oh, 100%. And like, if you see, like my last final, whatever, 93, 94, probably for the whole weekend in the high 80s. So I know the game's there, but you got to really, like, people got to really realise is in Australia we get one chance per year to go up there and to do it. And if it was a regular thing, you probably put less pressure on yourself. But when you've got that one chance, you got that probably 15, 20 minutes of playing darts. It does put pressure on it. But look, I enjoy every minute of it, even when I think, and that's all I hope when I go over is I actually can perform the way I play on thing. But that becomes a confidence thing, and at the moment I am confident. Things are just got to take it over when I come over, I guess.
Definitely, and as we say, you've played the World Series a few times now. What are the things that you've learnt from those experiences so far?
Oh, it's about being confident, I guess. It's about, okay, they're number one or they're number whatever in the world. You're nothing, sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's about what you do, not about what they do. You can play that one person 100 times and they beat you 99. You only got to beat them that once, and that's on the day. And that's the one thing I've tried to learn from the last time is just it's about me, what I do. Because look, don't get me wrong, their best at the moment is better than mine, but my best can sort of match them at a certain stages. Maybe not for a long period of time, but at least give them a try.
Well, let's get back to the DPA Tour then, and this year, and you went into that final weekend 7th in the rankings, $1,400 off the top spot. You did win that last event of the previous weekend. Did that give you a little bit of hope, a bit of belief that you could finish top?
Oh, it did that, and just the way the money works out is I kept saying to myself, look, if you win one, you're suddenly only a few $100 behind everyone, and it's game on sort of thing. And when I got to the final and lost the first final, I went, well, sort of that was my chance to jump automatically straight up to the top 4 or 5. But I was playing well, and just like I said, I had a good week on the board, which gave me the confidence as well.
We speak to a lot of players on this show about the races to qualify for events or get a tour card at Q School via the order of merit. Some players, they like to follow the rankings, all the permutations closely. Other players prefer to ignore them. What was your stance that weekend?
No, mine was ignore. Mine was I had the attitude, he's been number 7, I was going to play the number 2, whoever it may be, or the number 1, whoever it is. That gives me a chance to knock that person out. So that's one less person I've got to try to think. To me, it's a look, don't get me wrong, it's a lot easier when you're chasing rather than being chased. And that gives you a bit of relief. But at the end of the day, you can't control what they do. You got to worry about what you do. And like I did, if you keep winning, you make the thing. It doesn't matter what they do because you're the one winning it. And that's sort of the attitude I had to take to have a perfect weekend, to be honest.
Yeah, you said you needed a perfect weekend. You had a runner-up, a title, and then on the last event you won that title as well. Was there any point that you knew you had to win this game to get in, or were you just playing to win the event and then find out afterwards?
No, I was playing to win, but I knew after my quarterfinals that I'd qualified. I couldn't get overtaken after my last quarterfinals, which sort of when I started playing my semi. Like I was on a bit of a high to get back down to reality that you're still in a semi. Took me a few legs just, and then I sort of kicked in and did well. But no, from the quarterfinals I knew, but I was trying not to trying to worry about what they're doing. All I knew is I keep winning, then I win. It's simple as that.
And I know it's still quite fresh, but any idea yet on who you're going to be taking with you to London in December? And is this going to be the first time over here in the UK?
It is the first time in the UK, and apparently I've got a few managers and friends and family that are my managers now. All of a sudden, my nieces, they were actually in London in about 2-3 months ago, and my sister-in-law, and they're saying, well, they want to come now because they love London. So I think, and these all things I just got to work out who and if anyone's coming, and just go from there at the end of the day.
And I remember our last chat, you said if you got to the Worlds, you would look to try and stay over for Q School afterwards and give that a go. Is that still the plan?
Again, another thing, I sort of need to work stuff out because for the amount of time that I'm going to have to stay over with work, stuff like that, that's just all stuff. Look, if I don't do it this year, I'll actually probably set a goal for next year. If especially I still play this well, but look, end of the day, we'll see when it comes along, and just it's another thing to think about. I know to actually be realistic, I would still have to improve probably 15-20% to actually do it. There's no point doing it just for the sake of experience, because I don't believe in that. If you're going to do it, you've got to do it properly and have an actual chance, not just for experience.
And for you, you said you started playing darts at 21 years old. It was your dad who got you into the game. If you'd have told a 21-year-old Joe Comito back then, 22 years later, you're going to be playing in the biggest darts tournament in the world, what would he have said?
No way. I still remember it was just our local bowling club is where I started, just with the local guys, and no, I just did it because when I moved back from Perth to Harvey, and Dad needed a player, and spent time with the old boy pretty much, and playing darts, and then 3 years later, don't get wrong, got better, then I got worse. Then if you said to me 5 years ago, would I be doing this? And no, let alone when I was 21. But I'm here now, and I've said a few things and proved a few people wrong, and I'll prove another one wrong.
Yes, a great achievement. And you mentioned earlier that you've been in touch with Damon Heta. He's obviously moved over from Australia, based himself in the UK. He knows what it's all about. You've been picking his brains as well. What has he told you about coming over to the UK?
I just got information like what he did his first year, and like when he come and where he stayed, and what he did last year, and same as Lawrence Ryder. He's another one, and just pretty much it. Even Kohar, seen him last weekend, and he just to get an idea what they did and how long they come before, and just stuff like that, just basic stuff, nothing too thinking. Damon told me what he did and what he should have done and what he didn't do and stuff like that. So that helps. That helps having, and the idea is to see who the New Zealand boys, that the New Zealand number one, and maybe get in contact with them and see what they're going to do, and whoever wins the Oceanic, and see what they're going to do. So maybe we can all get together just to make our travel a bit easier.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And lastly, obviously, December, still a few months away. So what have you got planned between now and then, darts-wise, to get yourself ready for that Ali Pali debut?
Well, this is the thing. We've got our local grand final next Saturday. Then we've got the Bunbury Classic, the one I won 2 years in a row, the week after. So that's mid-October. Then there's literally nothing, like as in tournament-wise. It's ringing the boys up and getting together and having a throw against them, just to keep me going. But look, I practice on my own, and so that part's not going to worry me because I do it now. But every now and again, I will get the boys to have a throw together.
Good plan. Well, Joe, it's always great to get you on the show. Congratulations on qualifying for the World Championship, and we wish you all the best when it comes round in a few months' time, that debut.
Thank you very much, and hopefully I'll talk to you again about doing something else I haven't done.
Thanks to Jack and Joe for their time. Now we're going to finish up with the mailbag. 2 listener questions before we go. The first comes from John Thompson, who says, so with the current year of Euro Tour done and with the next year announced, what do you think is the next obvious place they should expand to? I, for one, would be see Poland, say shut up, and take my money.
Well, I think the key part of this question is the next obvious place. So I think John Thompson is right. The next obvious place is Poland. But I know we've talked about it before about where we want to see them go. And I think there's something to be said for picking a target place to expand the sport that might not yet have the audience, but where you think you can bring in people who would go to it, especially if you pick to have it during like a bank holiday weekend in a place that Brits might not be opposed to flying out for the weekend. So I think, bringing an event to Spain couldn't hurt. Could also think somewhere, I think Paris at some point should get a Premier League night. I think that would be an interesting way to grow the sport. But none of those are obvious, similar thing to like Rome. The obvious one is Poland. That's what the question asks. It does have a World Series event, which is well attended, but why not also get a European Tour event, especially since there are some pretty darn good players in Poland, and there will be more going forward. So it says obvious. So I think John Thompson is right. It is Poland, and that's obviously the correct answer.
Yeah, I know we've discussed this question a few times on the show before, and we know the lineup for 2025. The calendar's already out. There's going to be 14 Euro Tour events, one more next year. That is going to be in Germany. So there's no new countries on the list for next year. But I think we'd like to see a new country added to the Euro Tour, maybe either in 2026 or 2027. And Poland, yes, it's a great shout. And I did see recently the PDC put a press release out saying that the title sponsor of the Poland Darts Masters, which is the World Series event that's been going on for the last couple of years, they've extended their backing until at least 2027. So that for me says that Poland, they are going to have that World Series event for another few years. Does that mean the PDC then branch out with a second event in Poland and have a Euro Tour? Yeah, it remains to be seen. But beyond Poland and possibly Denmark, I don't think there's another country that's jumping out for me at the moment. We're lucky on this show that we chat to a lot of players from many different countries, and we'll sometimes ask them about the interest in darts in their country. And is there an appetite yet for a PDC stage event? They'll often say, not yet, it's still early days, the interest is growing, but it's not at that level yet. And I think of countries like France, Portugal, Italy, the Nordic and Baltic region, places like Sweden and Norway, darts, it is growing there, but not at the point where you'd see the PDC devote its resources to putting on a Euro Tour there. So yeah, I think Poland is the obvious shout at the moment.
And then we also have a listener question from NMK123. Does it matter that Luke Littler keeps changing his darts from once his darts company is produced and sold lots to the new darts fans?
Yeah, it's a good question. And as a darts podcast, we don't often talk about the actual equipment itself that the players are using week in, week out. But this has been a topic of discussion on social media. Anything that Luke Littler does, it is often talked about. And Luke, he did have a new set of darts brought out to the market by sponsor Target a few weeks back. And soon after that, he was using them on the stage. We saw at the World Grand Prix, the floor events as well. But at the weekend, he did switch back to his previous setup. We saw what a difference it made. We touched on it earlier on in the show, 110, 116, 110 averages in his first 3 games. And then he lost with a 106. And poor old Glenn Durrant, he was proud to see his name at the top of the Czech Darts Open averages going into the weekend, and it got taken away from him. I think it got beaten 2 or 3 times in the end. But yeah, of course, the equipment matters for players of any level. You've got to feel comfortable with what you're throwing with. Darts, it's all about the mental side of the game as much as it is the actual throwing part. And if you don't feel confident with your darts, then that's going to be a problem. And I'm not saying that Luke didn't feel happy with throwing his new darts, but going back to his old setup where he's had all that success, it would have brought back some good feelings getting them darts out of the case again. So regardless of how he played with his new darts and with a bit more practice, we might see him use them again. But they've been in the shop window. People have seen him use them on stage, on TV. That's the best advertisement you can get for potential customers. So yeah, him throwing them darts on TV, it would have generated a lot of sales. And I'm sure he'd be able to buy a few J20s off the back of it too.
Yeah, this is not anything new. Before MVG joined Winmar about probably 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. I've lost track of time. He was generally still using darts that he had used as a teenager when he won the World Masters, not the ones produced by his then manufacturer. And I know other players have done that similarly. Obviously, Peter Wright sometimes changes his darts halfway through his action. I assume they're all made by Red Dragon, but again, he probably has 7,000 different sets. At some point, he's probably used darts that were thrown by Peter Everson and Peter Manley as well. So who knows what Peter Wright has done. But it's not anything new. As I said, MVG had done similar in the past. I believe now he only uses his Winmars, or generally does. I don't think it's a problem as long as Luke Littler stands behind the product in the advertisements, and he seems to be doing that. Even though he's 17 years old, he acts professionally above his age for the most part. So I don't see it as a problem. The big thing to sell the darts is for him to win, and it doesn't matter what darts it doesn't really matter what darts he's using to push the product, because no one other than a few of us are going to notice that he's using something different. Anything else for this week?
As always, we've got a few thank yous before we go. Got to say thank you to our guests for joining us, to Alan and Joe for their time. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner, Condor Darts and Quiff. Links in the description for all of them. Do go and check them out. Thank you to everyone for listening. We're going to try and be back with an episode after the European Championship and just before the last lot of Pro Tours. We're going to try and squeeze an episode in. So until then, there's only one thing to do, and that is to enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed. And as you mentioned, the Players' Championship events midweek next week, the last two of the year. So much going on in the very immediate future. The European Championships plus the following weekend's Challenge Tour will decide the last three spots in the Grand Slam. The two Players' Championship events actually could have an impact on that as well, depending on what happens this weekend. And what happens there, and obviously they'll have a huge impact on who gets to Minehead, and more importantly, who gets to the World Championships. So all the fields for the majors are coming together and getting finalized in the very immediate future. So let us know what you'd like us to discuss about. We'll try to get some people on that we haven't had before as we get to those events and we get to see the new faces in them. But until then, you have a few days to hang tight. So take that breath while you can. Do all the hanging tight that you need to do. And then we'll be back after you've enjoyed some more darts.